Good evening and welcome to the public meeting of the Halton District School Board for February the 5th, 2020. At this moment, I'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is video voice recorded and live streamed from the hdsb.ca website. And I'd also like to ask that you turn all your devices to silent mode. As this is the beginning of February, I'd like to recognize that it is Black History Month and to recognize and honor the legacy of Black Canadians. Trustee Daniele is unable to attend this evening, but all the rest of the superintendents, I believe, are in the room. This evening, Trustee Reynolds will be honoring the land.
Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaron, the Haudenosaunee and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walk before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to thank and acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest this evening? Seeing none, we're up to the agenda. Is there any discussion at all on the agenda? Oops. Okay, could I have a motion to approve the agenda? Trustee Shuttleworth, seconded by Trustee Garretts. Okay. All those in favor of approving the agenda? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We have no delegations or presentations this evening, so we are up to the consent agenda items. So I'm going to put the motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve the consent agenda action items and receive the information items for February 5th, 2020, moved by Trustee Gray, seconded by Trustee Reynolds. Trustee Collard.
Yes, I would like to pull the close the gap update, please.
Okay, close the gap. Excellent. Would you like to ask your question now? Because you're the only person that's putting anything forward.
Yes, please. Through you to Superintendent Puccetti. On the close the gap update, you report the Pineland situation with air conditioning, and as you know, Pineland has been waiting for a number of years to get air conditioning. We finally have hydro in place, and I was wondering if you could reflect on the timelines and possible mitigation that could occur at Pineland.
Thank you. Through Chair Gribbins to Trustee Collard. As you noted, we did receive the hydro Burlington Hydro did undertake the upgrades that were necessary in order to bring more electrical service to the school. That work happened over the spring and summer, and we were able with that to both upgrade the electrical transformer and add the elevator to the school, which was funded through Close the Gap. Though Pineland has always met the criteria identified under the Close the Gap in terms of adding air conditioning to the second floor, previously we did not think that Burlington Hydro would bring that electrical service upgrade to that neighborhood for quite some time. And as such, we did not carry the budget for the air conditioning in the Close the Gap Phase 2. It still meets all the priorities. In fact, it would be the top priority for air conditioning based on the Close the Gap criteria that was identified. So when the next round of Close the Gap funding comes along, that school would be brought forward to the trustees in a report as another phase of Close the Gap funding. So I don't anticipate that will come in time for this summer for the work to be done, designed, completed for this summer, but hopefully for next summer it would be available then.
And is there anything that we can do in the meantime to get the second floor to be a little bit cooler?
Thank you. As we discussed, I'm going to have a look at it to see whether we could do such things as add what are called short throw ceiling fans, so they don't have a long you don't need quite the floor to ceiling height, and ceiling fans is one option. We will look at awnings because, as we discussed, you had mentioned that in the past there had been awnings. Perhaps that's an option for windows that are facing south or southwest. So we'll look and see what options we can bring to the building to provide a little bit of cooling during, or at least air movement during the warmer days.
Thank you very much.
Trustee Reynolds?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Was just hoping that the community could get an update on the situation of Burlington Central. The elevator and the air conditioning are still project in progress. So I'm just wondering if there's a timeline in which they could anticipate that being completed, or just where along in this project are those two activities?
So thank you again through the chair to Trustee Reynolds. So that project both those projects are underway, and we anticipate that the air conditioning will be undertaken and completed for 2021. I cannot at this point commit to having it ready for this summer because we do need a building permit to do the air conditioning, and that will take some time to get. The elevator is in design, and I believe it's actually it's been constructed. It's just we're just in the process of completing that right now.
Okay, seeing no other speakers, we'll call the question. Oops. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so we are up to 4.0 ratification action items. Vice Chair Harrison, do we have any business from private session that requires approval?
No, we don't.
Okay, thank you. We have no action items for this evening. So now we're up to communications to the board. First off is number 5.1, which is student trustee reports. Trustee Lau and Trustee Burns, do you have a report for us this evening? Go right ahead.
It's a little bit sticky sometimes, but this should work. Wonderful. Good evening, everyone, and happy February. This evening, Trustee Lau and I have some information to share with the Board of Trustees about the Student Trustee Election Campaign and Student Senate. We'll do our best to keep this short, so thank you in advance for bearing with us. First off, for the Student Trustee election, Associate Director Bogue was kind enough to prompt some discussion surrounding when campaigning can start and how ground rules will be established for candidates. For the point on the topic of when campaigning can start, Trustee Lau, myself, and our mentors have agreed to allow candidates to begin campaigning as soon as they hand in their registration forms, and some have already started to campaign online and on social media. In regard to the clarification of election and campaign rules, Trustee Lau and I will make these clarifications on February 13th when we host our candidates meeting. We also plan to send a letter to every registered candidate later this week, informing them of the rest of our election timeline and congratulating them for their efforts. Lastly, Trustee Lau and I noticed that we had planned a Student Senate meeting for the 18th of February, 1 week before our student trustee elections. To prevent student senators from needing to drive to the J.W. Singleton Center twice in 2 weeks, especially for those from our northern regions, Trustee Lau and I have decided to amalgamate the two meetings into one joint Student Senate and Student Trustee Election Day on the 25th, when we had originally scheduled our Student Trustee elections. To continue progress on creating HYLS workshops, Trustee Lau and I have also agreed to have our executives try and contact their workshop groups in order for progress to continue outside of normal Student Senate dates, whether over a conference call or over some other platform like Skype. Anyways, that covers my section of the Student Trustee Report. I'll hand it off to Trustee Lau.
Hi, everyone. I hope you guys are all doing well. I'll just start this off by saying that I was very excited to hear that the student trustee election policy motion passed last board meeting. And because I wasn't here in person to say it then, I'd just like to thank everyone who helped make that a success within a very short period of time. So anyways, in terms of HYLS, Trustee Burns and I have been working very closely with our Student Senate executives to brainstorm workshop ideas, and the planning is going very well. All of the feedback that I've heard from senators and executives have been positive so far. And while that is going on the forefront, I've also been busy designing HYLS merchandise behind the scenes in the form of personalized lanyards that we hope to distribute to senators and the HYLS attendees. To my knowledge, this hasn't been done before, but we hope that this way of marketing will help increase the Senate's exposure as well as to make the HYLS experience even more memorable. To finish up this student trustee report, I just wanted to inform the board and the constituents who listen to this live stream. I have been asked to sit upon the HDSB Period Poverty Subcommittee with Jewel Amoa, the board's new Human Rights and Equity Advisor, and Superintendents Buccetti, Salmini, and Hunt Gibbons, and Rosanna from the Research Department. And I'm looking forward to representing student voice and hopefully to bring some new perspectives to the table. Thank you.
Excellent. Director Miller?
Through the chair of the bench to Trustee Lau. I might have missed it. Do you have a date for the symposium yet?
It hasn't been set as of yet because we were looking into potentially moving it to the Milton Adult Learning Center, but then that doesn't fit our 200 attendees. So now we have to work with Sheridan. So we're still in the process of calling them and figuring that out.
Okay, excellent. We don't have any questions listed. So thank you very much. I'm glad everything's working out with the election, and it sounds like you have some enthusiastic people looking to be student trustees next year, so that's great. Okay, so we are now up to action items for February 19th. Sometimes we have items that meet established criteria to come to the board table twice before voting. We have 3 items this evening that meet that criteria. So, okay, so the first is policy approval, third-party agreements. Superintendent Nagoy, and I direct everybody to page 32 of your board package.
Thank you, and through the chair to all trustees. This report presents a new framework policy that is covering the treatment of all third-party agreements, whether they constitute a contractual obligation or a good faith collaboration or collaborative relationship. There's a detailed administrative procedure which was included in the consent package, and it was created and replaces the corporate partnership sponsorships and donations administrative procedure, and sets the framework on the development, approval, and review of all types of agreements and we do call them partnerships in for lack of a better word, but it's collaborative relationships as well as contractual obligations. This particular policy also sets out the requirement or expectation that all of our relationships with third parties will be in the form of a written agreement. And it also identifies the distinction between partnerships and the legal word for partnerships, which sets up to be is not so much a community partnership, but a legal term for a contractual agreement. So just a lot more detail is provided in terms of the framework and the checklist that we want to follow to have a consistent approach to developing written agreements with all third parties. And it's up for your review and approval at the next board meeting. Thank you.
There is no one on the speakers list. So thank you very much. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Okay, next we are up to the Palermo Boundary Review. Report 20018 on page 35 of the board package. Superintendent Ruddick, welcome, and Superintendent Blackwell, welcome.
So thank you, and through the chair to trustees, Superintendent Blackwell and I are very pleased to present you with this report this evening and the recommendation from the director on the Palermo Boundary Review. We'll walk through the recommendation as well as the background leading up to the process and decision that's here before you this evening. As well as the pathway that was chosen, the option that was developed, and the rationale for that option, that recommendation. The recommendation is, be it resolved that the Halton District School Board adjust the boundaries for the elementary schools in ERA 114 and 115 as outlined in option 1 and detailed in the report 20018, effective for September 2020. In this recommendation, you will see that there are 2 study areas referred to as the North and South study areas. Those areas are within the Palermo community, but have been directed to attend Heritage Glen Public School due to historical enrollment pressures at Palermo. So there you can see on the map the 2 areas in red. The one at the top of the screen is what we're referring to as the North study area, and the area in red at the bottom is the South study area. The section of the map that is in blue is the Palermo catchment, and you can see the location on the map at the top of that quadrant. And the area that is green is the Heritage Glen catchment, and the Heritage Glen school location is in the bottom right corner. The number of students who are impacted by this boundary review or in those 2 study areas, the North and South pocket, there's currently 64 students, JK to grade 8, who live in those 2 pockets and are being directed to Heritage Glen. So why now? Why are we doing this? Why did we do this boundary review? In 2011-12, the boundary review was completed because the enrollment forecasts at Palermo were on the increase, and there was not sufficient space within the school to continue to house more students. The 2 pockets, North and South pockets, weren't yet developed at the time, and so it was determined that those students would be directed to Heritage Glen as they moved into the area. But why are we looking at this now? Palermo is no longer experiencing those same enrollment pressures. In fact, the projection over the next 10 years has the enrollment on the decline. Palermo is also currently a holding school for Northeast number 2, and as you know, we are opening Northeast number 2 in September, and so all the students that are currently holding there will be moved either to Odenawi or to the new school. So the students in those 2 pockets can now attend the school in their community. And this last reason is really quite a significant reason, and that being that the students will attend secondary school with their cohort. So currently, and you'll see on the map here, that currently all of the students north of Upper Middle in the pink attend Garth Webb. So the students in the north and south pockets attend Garth Webb. All of the students south of Upper Middle, and that is in, I don't know, Dusty Rose, I guess. Not sure what color that is. They all attend Abbey Park. Sorry. So there are currently 5 grade 8 students in the north and south pocket. They will split from their cohort at Abbey Park this year and attend Garth Webb for grade 9 next year. And so if we look at returning these students to their community school, the students would transition with our cohort to high school. So we formed a boundary review steering committee. And you can see on that committee, I chaired co-chaired the BRSC, along with Superintendent Blackwell, who chaired the Boundary Review Committee, with Trustee Shuttleworth. We had, of course, Trustee Al Harrison and Trustee Oliver as the trustees representing their schools. We had representatives from the Planning Department, and we didn't involve program services, business services, and student services in this particular boundary review. So the role of the steering committee is to determine which schools are a part of the boundary review, and in this case, of course, that's Heritage Glen and Palermo, to generate an initial boundary option, and to determine which pathway we would use for the process, whether it would be a full community consultation with a boundary review committee, or whether it would be pathway 2, which is informing the community of the recommended option. And then, of course, this committee forms the recommendation to Admin Council and the director. In this particular boundary review, we did a pathway 2, informing the community, really because there were no options to generate. There's really only 2 options: to either go forward with returning the students to their community school, or to not go forward with that. So we chose a pathway 2. We did present to the community at a public information evening and invited not only the students that are currently attending Heritage Glen in those pockets, but we invited all the residents of those pockets who may have school-age children coming into our system. We invited them to the public meeting in December. And you can see there the timelines of the process, along with the opportunity for a feedback form and an email to submit feedback and questions. So the criteria that we use to measure boundary review options, of course, the viability of the program, proximity to schools, the balance of overall enrollment, stable long-term boundaries, transportation, fiscal responsibility, and student experience, as well as any other criteria that's generated by the committee. So the recommended option that we are putting forward to you this evening is that as of September 2020, in the Palermo North and South Pocket areas, that kindergarten to grade 7 English and grade 2 to 7 French immersion move from Heritage Glen to Palermo Public School. All grade 8 students English and French immersion to remain at Heritage Glen, and that existing students at Heritage Glen may remain at the school on optional attendance. However, any new registrations from those pockets would be directed to Palermo. So you can see this is the map for the recommended option, with the north and south pockets attending Palermo Public School. So this recommendation, it provides for a stable long-term boundary, particularly now that there is declining enrollment at Palermo. It does provide for an overall balance of enrollment, as Palermo's utilization will increase slightly over the longer term with the return of these students. It creates a unified elementary cohort for the study areas where they would all attend their community school, K-8 at Palermo. It ensures that the elementary English and French immersion cohorts remain together when they travel on to their designated secondary school. And it's flexible in addressing the concerns related to students currently attending Heritage Glen, as we did hear from those people that they would prefer to remain at Heritage Glen rather than change schools and transfer to Palermo. And we're happy to take any questions.
Okay, I have some people on the speakers list. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through your chair to Superintendent Ruddock and Director Miller. I will be supporting this recommendation. I think it's good for students to attend a school that is in their own neighborhood, where they can build friendships that extend between both school and home, and where they end up going to the same high school, which in this case will be Garth Webb. Thank you, Superintendent Ruddock, for outlining the history behind these two parcels, the two study areas of the Palermo neighborhood, and why they were initially directed to Heritage Glen. I think that's an important historical piece for the community to understand. And prior to the town of Oakville ward boundary changes, Palermo was a school in my ward, and hence my keen interest in this issue. When those neighborhoods were first established, I received a number of calls and emails from families wondering why their students could not attend Palermo. However, we are now in a position to open up Palermo to the students in those two areas. I appreciate that for some families, moving their students from Heritage Glen to Palermo may pose a challenge for a number of reasons, including attachment to their current school. And so I'm grateful to see the recommendations that have been made to be able to grandparent grade 7 students and extend optional attendance for the younger students. I do have two questions. Can you please tell us about the process for moving students to Palermo, those who will want to move out of Heritage Glen, and what will the integration process for those students look like?
So through the chair to Trustee Oliver, once there is a decision on this boundary review, it will be communicated to all impacted families. We will explain the process for applying for optional attendance so that they are really clear on the process and the availability of that option to them. As part of our boundary review process, we do establish an integration committee following a decision around a boundary change. And so a committee will be established, assuming that there are students who are moving schools. A committee will be established that will involve parent representatives, the school administration, and trustees, and will ensure that there is a plan to support those students making a change of schools.
Trustee Collard.
Thank you. Through you to Superintendent Ruddock and Blackwell. Thank you for this report. I think it's a great move to get the kids all going to the same school together. I think that's great. On one of the slides, you had an acronym PIF regarding feedback, parent feedback. And I was wondering, what is PIF? And if we could perhaps include the full term in the next meeting so that anyone watching would understand what PIF is.
Through the chair to Trustee Collard, we're going to have to explore what that acronym stands for.
Thank you.
There we go. Public information feedback form.
Thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Thanks for all the work and the recommendations, and I think that they reflect genuinely the community input that we received, the concern both for staying with established relationships at Heritage Glen and for the families that want to move their students back to Palermo, closer to where they live. So in the report, we don't use the word grandparenting, but Trustee Oliver did. And I think in essence, those things mean the same thing. I know the parents use the word, they're more familiar with the word grandparenting, but that is the same intent is reflected in the report, I think, just to double check. And secondly, can you just indicate how families were made aware that this report is coming to the board? Because we don't have any delegations, and I don't want to just assume that that's because everybody's super happy. I just want to make sure they all know.
So through the chair to vice chair, first of all, the community was informed in December following the public information meeting around all of the timelines, including when the board report would be posted to the public site, when the first board meeting would be, where the report would be presented for information, as well as the subsequent board meeting date for decision. And then following that, once the board report was posted, an additional communication was sent out as a reminder that this was coming to the board for information this evening and for decision in 2 weeks. And to your second question, I've forgotten it already. What was it? So to clarify that the difference between grandparenting and optional attendance, for our grade 8 students who would be grandparented, they will be given transportation to get to Heritage Glen. The students who have the option to remain on optional attendance, that is without transportation, but the flexibility to remain in the school if they choose.
Okay. So there are no more speakers on the speakers list. Thank you very much. We will see you again in a couple of weeks. So next we have the Milton to be determined boundary review, report 20021. On page 43 of the board package. Welcome, Superintendent Newton.
Good evening, and through the chair. Tonight we're excited to present for you, though the screen has gone black, Kevin, the Milton to be determined area. It's not a very sexy name, but it's an area where they have just put up the scaffolding and are about to put a digger in the ground. It's located on Dairy Road and Regional Road 25, which most of you would know as Bronte Road, Ontario Road, right, as you come off the highway. To that extent, we are anticipating 30 to 40 elementary students will eventually live in that area in the next 18 months. Good? Okay. We'll just go with this. That's okay. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. It's okay. Okay, thanks, Kevin. So the reason we decided to do this boundary review was that we thought we had an opportunity to do a boundary review before people move into a neighborhood, and to also then, before they purchase a piece of land or a house in this new Connect, it's called, building facility, that they would know exactly where their children would be going. So we thought we'd get started on this, and we thought we would be able to post this because the digger is going in the ground in June 2020. So we thought that that would be appropriate. The area you will see is this little triangle that is located on the map above, and that is exactly on the exact corner across from the gas station where you'll have Dairy Road and Ontario Street. We did consult with the long-term accommodation plan, which is the 10-year guide, which Dom and his planning team provided us with all the charts. You will have all of these are links that you can open up to give you an example of one. You will see that this is how we provide each of the options through the planning department, each of the maps, including on the left side is the English program boundary. On the right side would be French immersion program boundary for students in grade 2 to grade 8. You will see down below it's all the charts for the projections for the next 10 years, and including specialty programs, cottages that would be added to the site, i.e. portables, over 10 years, and any special notes for consideration. Okay, now just bear with me. Here we go. Good, thanks. So we decided to do a boundary review pathway 2. So this does not involve an information evening. What it involves is the planning department, Trustee Danelli and Trustee Gertz, who both represent Milton, along with Gord Truffin as a family of superintendent outside of the area, and myself as the family of schools superintendent for Milton. So in September, as you remember, the board approved having a boundary review for this area, and you can see the dates as the following. And what we are hoping to do this evening is to share the information with you, give you a recommendation that we would like to recommend to the director, and then come back on February 19th for voting. These are the schools that are impacted and what we looked at in terms of adding students to these 30 to 40 elementary students to some configuration of the schools listed in the chart. And as always in all of our boundary reviews, these are the criteria that we'd like to consider. So primarily keeping these 30 students together regardless of program choice. We'd like to limit the number of transitions from students. So it's nice to start in the same school and then transition into high school rather than doing multiple moves within a neighborhood. We'd like to also balance overall enrollments, which is a very challenging thing to do in Milton when we're oversubscribed and it's such a vibrant, growing community. We also look at dual track school accommodation, whether they can handle English and French immersion programming. Busing is always an issue, and obviously fiscal responsibility. You will notice that all of the mileage has been determined in terms of busing. For elementary schools, it's 1.6 kilometers. However, in saying that, this is Derry Road and Bronte/Ontario Street, so we don't want students crossing any of that area, and so buses would be provided no matter what choice we go to. So I'll run through the 4 options. I'll leave the one that we want you to endorse through the director's recommendation last. The first option was to consider putting them at Tiger Jeet. You can see that they both, English or French immersion, could go to Tiger Jeet. The issue is there's this shaded area right here, this purple, violet, lavender color. These children already can see Tiger Jeet from their home. And 5 years ago, they were directed to go to Anne J. MacArthur because Tiger Jeet is full at the inn. So when these, I know we're only talking 30 students, but if we ask these 30 students to go to Tiger Jeet, then the neighbors in this community are not going to be too happy knowing that they are to go to Anne J. MacArthur and they can't go to Tiger Jeet. So that was, that's the downfall of that particular piece. And in addition to that, we would be adding a minimum of 1 portable to Tiger Jeet to accommodate those students. Option 2 would see out of the 30 students, a number would choose the English program. They would start in kindergarten at Sam Sherritt. And if they chose French immersion, they would then have a transition to E.W. Foster in grade 2. And then in grade 6, they would have to go to W.I. Dick, which is the school just off the map that accommodates French immersion, because E.W. Foster is a school that only goes from kindergarten to grade 5. So we thought that this option, as you can see in a chart form, provides 3 transitions for students if they elect to take French immersion. In option 3, the only difference is that all children would start at E.W. Foster regardless if you are French immersion or English programming, so kindergarten through to grade 1. Then in grade 2, everybody moves. So you either move to Sam Sherritt or you move to E.W. Foster for your English program and French program. And then again, you make another transition for middle school, whether it be W.I. Dick for 6-8, which only has grade 6 to 8, or you would go to Sam Sherritt when you hit at the end of grade 5 at Sam Foster in English and go to Sam Sherritt for grade 6 and 8. Sam Sherritt is a school that accommodates K to 8. So you would be coming in midstream. So this is the recommendation that we'd like to have Director Miller consider. It is asking all students, no matter what your program is, to go to Anne J. MacArthur. Now, Anne J. MacArthur is sitting at close to 950 students now, but we're looking at adding another 30 or 40, and it can accommodate up to 1,200 before that we would be looking at portables in 2025. So in this sense, we feel this is the best option to offer because all the students, the 30 to 40 that could be here, would be going to the same school, Anne J. MacArthur, which would be very excited to accept these students, regardless of grade or program. It minimizes the transition, so obviously then you would be looking at just transitioning into high school. It does keep all the cohorts together, keeps all the learning needs together, and it creates a strong sense of belonging in that neighborhood. And these boundaries we would put in place in September 2020. And depending on the speed of the building, starting in June 2020, we could be looking at some of these students landing by Christmas. So that's the recommendation that we offer at this time.
Do we have any questions for Superintendent Newton? Trustee Garretts.
I support this 100%. Our estimate of 30 to 40 students, I think, is probably very low. It is a very large condo building, and it is sold out. So I'm feeling that there are going to be a lot of kids, but it sounds to me like Anne J. MacArthur is the school anyway, because it sounds like it'll be able to hold extra if there's more than 40 students. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay.
There are no more speakers on the speakers list, so we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Okay, we are up to information items for this evening. We have two. The first is number 531, 2020 solar installations funded through energy savings, report 20016 on page 48 of your board package. Superintendent Pichetti, welcome to the desk.
Thank you, Chair Gribbins. So this is a report to update you on the solar program we would like to embark upon. There was a previous report, 18150, that detailed how we would need to take matters into our own hands to self-fund doing solar rooftop installations. There does not appear to be any funding source available for school boards at this current time. And because of some of the energy saving measures we've been undertaking, particularly with our building automation systems, bringing them into line, we have generated some savings under our utilities, which in turn have been converted into funding that we can then use to pay for solar installs. So this report tells you a little bit about the roofs that we would like to tackle first. The reason we chose these roofs really is the fact that they're newer roofs and they are larger roofs with not a lot of equipment on the roofs. So we can install quite large solar arrays out there. These would be net metered. So these are arrays that would produce electricity that we would use in the school. We have connected the Boich system, which was installed a few years ago. It was supposed to be what's called a FIT program, under a FIT program. In other words, it was supposed to feed electricity to the grid, and we would have been paid for that electricity. But at the time, hydro couldn't accept the electricity we were generating. And the FIT program went away, doesn't exist anymore. So it's actually the most economical thing for us to do is to produce our own electricity. At this point, the system's been connected since late November, beginning of December. So I can't tell you quite yet. I'll need a few months of the system running to ensure we have the data to know just how much energy we're producing. But we figure it's enough for the Boich system anyway to power 9 classrooms, more or less. But, you know, the more technical people will actually figure that out at some point. And in the summertime, when we're producing the most energy and we have the least use in the building, we are actually able to feed that electricity to the grid, and hydro will give us a credit back for the electricity that we generate. So for these new arrays, they're going to be even larger than the Boydge system. We're going to start with the engineering and specifications for the first 3. We hope to have the first one completed, I can't remember what I said, but it's in relatively, by 2020. And have the next ones ready to go in the spring of 2021, I think that's what I said. I don't know. It's in there. And we're just going to keep on rolling, and, you know, it will become a program that continues to generate savings on our electricity, which in turn means we can keep doing these type of solar programs. So, if there are any programs that come available to us, we will immediately apply and hopefully be able to get some funding so that we don't have to keep self-funding our own solar array system. So any questions? I'm very excited about this report, as you can tell. So any questions, I'm happy to respond.
Any questions for the superintendent? Okay, well, I am extremely excited myself about this. I remember a number of years ago talking to the previous superintendent about the solar array on John Boydge, and to know that it's working and it is able to actually help fund other sites and to move forward on other sites across the board. It's incredibly exciting that we are able to take advantage of renewable energy and fits nicely into our discussions about sustainability and environmental stewardship. So thank you so much for bringing this forward. Oh, and Director Miller, go ahead.
I just thank you through Chair Dervens, through you, Chair Dervens. I want to acknowledge the work of Superintendent Puccetti and all this around. Superintendent Puccetti is a champion of renewable energy and renewable resources and the environment, and I think we're lucky to have her at this board to help us do that. We will make a big deal about this in communications, because the young people that attend all our schools, this is a big issue for them, the environment, and this shows to the community and the kids and the students that we are taking steps at a corporate level beyond what the students do in their schools to make a difference in terms of the environment and address the very serious challenges we have in the environment. So,
and we do have a speaker, Trustee Amos.
Thank you. Superintendent Puccetti, do we have the 2 systems at M.M. Robinson and Iroquois Ridge? Do they produce anything for us at this point? I mean, they're 2 10-kilowatt microfit systems. I understand that, but it says that the J.W. Boydge does generate an estimated amount, but what do the other 2 do?
Thank you through the chair to Trustee Amos. 10 kilowatts are not very big systems, but those systems were done under a FIT contract, feed-in tariff contract, so they actually generate revenue for us. Not a lot of money, but every quarter, I believe, is it quarter? We get a check from the local utility company because we're feeding energy into the grid.
Can I just follow up? Thank you for that. My next question is, as we are building new schools, would that be a possibility to have a system like this installed with the building of each of the new schools? Because it seems to me it would be a perfect fit.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we are looking at that in terms of when we design a new school. Our challenge right now, as you know, is to build new schools within the current benchmark. And so adding a solar array as part of the upfront capital cost would be a bit of a challenge with the current benchmark, unfortunately. But the way we design our roofs and the way the electrical system in new schools make them very adaptable to adding a solar array at any time. Well, any time within the first, I'd say, 5 to 10 years of the life of that roof, because the last thing you want to do is put a solar array on a roof and then 10 years later you have to come along and replace the roof. Most of the arrays are ballasted systems, so they're not directly attached to the roof, so you can move them, but it's you'd rather target the newer roofs first.
Well, thank you for that. So it looks like with the design of the new schools, we'll try and make the roofs accessible so we can add on later. Thank you very much.
I just actually thought of one other question. I know Robinson has the OYAP program, the electrical. Is there an opportunity, do they use it at all in their programming?
Thank you, Chair Gribbins. I'm going to refer that to Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons. I would not think that they would be accessing the roof directly because we would have a safety concern. One of the things we mentioned in this report is that we're currently working with program to develop an online dashboard so that students will be able to extract information, the data collected from these solar arrays across the board, and use that information in any kind of capacity as an authentic kind of teaching tool. But you do raise an interesting point. At a certain point, as more solar arrays are built in Ontario, and we hope that is what's going to happen, we are going to need technical staff who know how to work with those solar array systems. They're not very complicated systems, but they still do need maintenance. And then there's, of course, the whole connecting them to the building automation system. I think that's a field where in Ontario, we're going to need those kinds of people to work on those systems.
So there may be potentially to add to that OEAP program at Robinson to work directly, potentially, with that solar array on the roof.
Through the chair, to the chair, yes, we would have to change current practices as students are not allowed on the roof for any reason. Staff are only allowed on the roof. There was a time where people like to film things from roofs, etc. Safety comes first at all times, and students are not allowed on the roofs of our buildings. However, if there was an educational purpose for that, we would certainly revisit that, of course.
Okay, that's great news too. Okay, there are no more speakers on the speakers list. Thank you so much. Okay, next we are up to number 532, Budget Development, Report 20019 on page 50 of the board package. Welcome, Superintendent Nagoy.
Thank you, and for the chair to all trustees. I am pleased to present you with the budget development report. It provides an outline for the schedule of the budget development for 2020-2021, which is appended to the report. Some of the key dates that I wanted to mention, and we actually have updated our website as well to include this information. And as we progress through the budget process, we will attach reports and presentations at that link. So some of the key dates, we are working on the budget survey to be released by the end of this week. We have a committee of the whole on February 12. There's a presentation on the budget and providing a bit of an update, as well as feedback from trustees. The committee of the whole on April 22nd, we would like to present an update presentation. We hope by then that the grants for student needs will be released. As we know, currently, the ministry and staff have committed to release it on time, which is about the end of March. And we are preparing a draft budget for the January 3rd board meeting with the final approval of the budget of the January 17th. In terms of the provincial perspective, we just wanted to maybe start a little bit with an overview of last year. I think it's important as we embark on this new budget that we look a little bit back in terms of some of the changes that have been introduced in the reform to education funding. There were a number of reductions in the budget, and for a growth board like ours, it had a big impact in terms of budget reductions and funding reductions. A lot of the items that have an impact are currently at central negotiation table. So they aren't something that we have information on or we can plan on. The areas may become, so if they are being agreed upon, they may be reflected in the grants for student needs. If not, there may be a couple of releases of the funding as and when information becomes available. So there's going to be quite a bit of uncertainty in the budget planning this year as well. There has been a couple of consultation pieces, the provincial budget consultation, as well as the education funding consultation that took place in January. And the board has been part of both of those and submitted written recommendations. They are available in our agenda package tonight as well, in terms of providing information. While all the information on all aspects of the funding was welcomed, some of the points that they were focusing on were around reducing red tape and administration burdens. So there's not a lot of information just from that perspective in terms of where the funding next year might be, what direction it might be going. Most of our funding does come from grants for student needs. As we look at the current year, we receive approximately 91% of our revenue, or close to 700 million, from the province. So that's the main driver. We are still expected to grow. So if we're looking at our enrollment, we're expected to grow by almost 600 students, most of that growth being at the secondary panel. From a board's perspective, the key objectives of the budget are to align our resources to the priorities and the goals in the multi-year plan, as well as the operating plan and the special education plan. So we look forward to hear from our stakeholders, to hear from our trustees as we move forward in this process. So right now we don't have a lot of information in terms of planning. We are looking at status quo as per the education reform formula that we have for the current year, and looking at growth, as I've mentioned. We're closely following along to see what is being agreed upon at the central table and how that would impact our budget. And as information becomes available, we would be coming back to trustees with more reports. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for Superintendent Ngoye? Seeing none, I have a question. So, and this ties into budget and staffing. Right now, students in grade 8 through secondary are filling out option sheets, and I understand staffing follows that. With regards to class sizes and the number of e-learning credits that students will be taking next year, what are the ratios and number of e-learning credits that we're currently supposed to be working with? And how does this affect our planning?
Thank you. Through the chair to trustees. As of now, we are still working with the ministry's B memo from last March, B08, the new vision for education, which meant that boards were to make their way to a 28-to-1 class size over a 4-year period, and prescribed how boards were to go about doing that. And that is the only direction that we've received from the ministry. We have sought clarification through our various professional associations, through COSBO, Code, the Directors of Education, and OPSPA. We have inquired as to whether there was any intention that they knew of to update that information for boards, and we've not received any word back yet. We have still a few weeks to go before we start to implement our initial staffing in the secondary panel. In terms of e-learning, we have not received an update to the information that we received again last spring in the new vision for 4 mandatory e-learning courses. So we're also seeking clarification with that on that from the Ministry of Education.
Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons.
Through the chair, just to add, so in our e-learning preparations, we're going through our regular process of reviewing our course offerings, voice and choice for students. We're operating that our own e-learning will continue to exist as a choice for students. And until we hear anything different, we will just move forward with our staffing and our offerings from there.
Okay, because the understanding from the announcement was it was going to be centralized e-learning. So is there an understanding that our e-learning courses may qualify as an e-learning course to meet the requirements for graduation? And also, do we have any indication from the ministry as to exactly what courses they're thinking of implementing as e-learning courses for the 4 credits?
Through the chair to the group, no. We're not aware at this point whether our own homegrown e-learning would satisfy that or if there would be a move to a centralized program. But because we're not aware of that, we're moving forward, assuming positive intent. We're very proud of our own program and we would like to see it continue. And so we're moving forward in the hopes that it does.
Okay, so just to clarify, we are right now at 24.85 for our ratio at the secondary level. And right now we have 0 mandatory credits. And we're marching onwards at this point because we have been given no information otherwise that we are to move towards 28-1 and over the 4 years and to expect still 4 mandatory credits starting next year.
To clarify, the information that we received and that we are still valid would indicate that we would continue to move toward 28-1 in our current staffing process. So we are at 24.85, but we would have to follow the same process as we followed last year in order to move forward to 28-1. So we wouldn't stay at 24.85 absent any clarification from the ministry. We would be moving to a higher class size.
So we could see ourselves potentially next year. How high could you estimate that we could get to by September?
Absent any different direction from the ministry, we haven't run the numbers, but we are projected for growth again next year in our secondary panel. And if we had the same type of attrition, we would significantly move from 24.85 toward 28, as we did from 22 to 24.85 in 1 year.
I have so many comments, but I'm not going to make it. Trustee Shuttleworth, thank you.
Thank you through the chair. So I just got a quick question, probably for Executive Officer McFadden and Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons. So recently, or in recent months, I will say, the government has been saying that they have reduced the e-learning mandatory courses to 2, and they also have said in the past that they had reduced the increase in class size. However, you're telling us that we are still back to where we were last year. So I'm just wondering where sort of the clarity lies in those statements from the government and
That's correct. That has been reported in the press that the positions at the central bargaining table have been changed to 25-1 and to 2 mandatory e-learning courses. But there has been no revision to the government's direction to boards on how to staff, or on no clarification provided on the delivery of the e-learning courses.
And follow up then, sort of going on for that, which might be back to you, Superintendent Nagoy. So if there is this statement of looking at going back to the 25-1, which they are making, is there any changes in the budget numbers that they're giving us?
Superintendent McFadden had mentioned the funding formula currently is tied to 20-1, and there's guidelines on the calculation on how we receive a portion of that funding back towards a lower class size based on attrition. There is nothing that came out, because that is part of the regulation and the grants. There's nothing that has come out officially to say that 25-1 might be the ceiling that they're looking at. And we're hoping, we have put out there the messages to the ministry and the ministry's staff. And we're hoping to get some clarification and direction, because especially as our board, we're almost at 25-1 this year.
Thank you.
Director Miller?
Through you, Chair Drabens, I just want to clarify one thing Trustee Shuttleworth said. You said back to 25-1. We are 24.85, so I want to make it clear if the public is watching, it would still be an increase in class sizes for us if it was 25-1. So,
Trustee Gray?
Thank you very much through the chair to Deb McFadden and possibly to Superintendent Hunt Gibbons. Is there any move to change or alter the staffing timelines that are currently in place every year, and also any move to alter the school organization timelines given the uncertainty of the times that we're in?
Yes, through the chair to Trustee Gray. As you may remember from last year, we were very fortunate with both of our local ETFO and OSSTF unions to agree mutually to delay the staffing timelines until we achieved more certainty around the process. So we have a meeting with our secondary partners next week, and it would be on the agenda as well, the staffing timeline. It would be our hope that we would mutually agree in the best interest of not having to do it twice should clarification come out sometime in the next few weeks or months, to delay until we have better information. And as a result of that delay in secondary, I can say that we came within 1 FTE of our mutual projections. So we have better information the longer we wait, because we have more resignations and retirements in, more leave requests in, and we're further along in our enrollment projection timelines. So we found that worked quite well, and we understand now that there is room in the timelines to shorten them if we need to. So we'll be having that conversation most certainly with our secondary union locally, and not certain if it's necessary with our elementary, as there's no projected increase in staffing or in class size in elementary right now, but we'll be having those conversations with secondary.
As there's no one else on the speakers list right now, I have a question, and I don't know who it's to. Maybe to you, Director Miller. And that is that you have described going to schools and seeing the classrooms at the current ratio, and some of them are quite heavily burdened. And that's at 24.85. What kind of environment will our students be sitting at as this rate potentially, if we're looking at something similar to last year, rises to close to 27-1 by next year?
Through you, Chair Drabens, to you, Chair Drabens, and all trustees. As you mentioned, I have visited several of our secondary schools and gone into classes in which, and it's ran the full gamut. I've gone to ELL classes, grade 10 academic, grade 12 university stream, grade 9 applied, all sorts of classes, and seen the full array of classes we have. If we continue to increase class size, the ramifications are still significant. We would see an increase in the number of specialty classes probably canceled, usually in the tech areas, and I don't want to say definitely in the tech areas, but usually in the tech areas because those tend to be smaller, and some of our specialized arts classes. So we would continue to see a decrease in the number of offerings, I think, that our schools would be able to provide to their students. In addition, we would be having some challenges with kids in class in terms of the number of students in class. And I'll give one example. I was in a grade 12 writer's class, writer's craft class, and the students came in and there were not enough desks and chairs, and it was in a portable, and they had to go to the portable next door and hump some chairs from that portable into their portable. And I asked the teacher, well, what happens at the end of the class? They said, well, some of them have to go back to the portable because the class that's in the same portable they took them from is also big. So we have that situation where kids don't, I think the principal has done a great job, and I'm not going to mention school has done a great job, and that's not happening now because I asked that person, but at the beginning of the school year it was. So those challenges will continue to exist and be exacerbated, I guess is the best way to describe it. I'd look to Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons and Associate Director Bogue to add any comments to mine.
Through the director to the trustees, exacerbated for sure, just a continuation of what we have already seen. In addition to physical space and room, there's also that amalgamation that's needed because there are graduation requirement courses, those that need to run regardless of the size, which then puts pressure. If you think of it as a balloon, if you squeeze it here, it pops out in a different direction someplace else. And so we can't keep moving and expect that we will keep the balloon in its same shape. And so when we have to run small classes to ensure that students graduate from something like their third required math credit in, say, a math for everyday life, that puts the pressure on and says we have to run the much larger classes at the university level, and means that we can offer fewer of the optional or elective courses, not just in tech, but across the curriculum. And we would have to look at that and make decisions based on where our numbers ended up.
And the only other additional thing that I might offer would be, with larger classes and with particularly university classes maybe built at a higher number, those kids might be more independent learners and might be okay, but we're in classes where we've got some students that struggle or have specific needs, learning needs, special education needs. In larger classes, they obviously will not have the same level of support. And so we might see a little bit of we might see an impact for those particular students.
One other, I think this is my last question, and that is goes to when I was attending the boundary review meeting for the new Milton School, I noticed the drawings in the classrooms say a load of 22. And I was wondering, can our, especially newer high schools, can they handle, what is their maximum in their academic classrooms before things become uncomfortable or even head into some fire regulation issues? Superintendent Pichetti?
Yes. So, Chair Gribens, the classrooms in high schools typically could be loaded up to 35, 40. The concern I have, and that's one I've explained to you before, the mechanical system is designed for an occupancy of 30 in that room. If you were to be in that room for the full day with more than 30 people, it would get a little bit uncomfortable. Our new schools all have operable windows, though. So if the classroom had operable windows, that would help. But that is a bit of a concern for us. And to just change the design in the mechanical system so that it can accommodate more people in the room would be quite expensive for new schools. we design our mechanical systems to a certain standard and code, and to just make them much bigger systems would be quite expensive.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm not sure. Oh, sorry, Trustee Gray, you're back on the list.
Thank you very much, through the chair. Just have a question, and I'm not sure if I would be directing this maybe to Director Miller, but last year, as we know, as we headed in, before we headed into September, students were made aware that they weren't going to get the courses that they wanted, and I wondered what the impact was on the enrollment in summer school, and do we anticipate, once again, an enlarged enrollment in summer school, and are we preparing for that larger draw this summer?
Dr. Bogue.
We are starting to prepare for summer school right now. We don't know whether there is going to be significant demand or not. We have seen a slightly larger influx of students to alternative ed this year. I think that might be a bit of a result of some larger classes, those kinds of things. But certainly if there is more interest in summer school, we will be able to accommodate that, and we'll plan accordingly.
Well, there's no more speakers on the speakers list. Thank you so much, Superintendent Ngoy. I know you're the messenger. It's frustrating news. We would hope that the ministry sees us as partners in education and will communicate appropriately, so that we can staff appropriately and provide appropriate educational programs that suits the needs of our students, and also a reasonable learning environment, and be able to, I understand we still don't know about e-learning courses, if we're responsible for providing technology to be able to access where these students will be taking courses. There's so many question marks, and yet we are heading into planning for next year. So I don't know, I implore the ministry to reach out and have conversations with us. We've written a number of letters on this so far. I'm not sure if anybody has any suggestions of what to do next. Please keep conversing with your MPPs. I know I have, in the next week, I have 2 meetings, and I will certainly be speaking on these issues. But if you do, please also speak up. I suppose letting our school councils know what's going on. I'm sure they're asking anyways. So I don't know. Thank you so much. Okay. Notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion? Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Okay, thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. My notice of motion is related to the annual cycle of board reports, and I believe that previously we've talked about the possibility to bring an annual or a report related to our suspensions and expulsions, and I would just add how schools are utilizing collaborative problem solving and restorative justice practices as well. So in that regard, I have made the following draft motion for consideration. Be it resolved that the director prepare a report for the board regarding suspensions, expulsions, and how schools are utilizing collaborative problem solving and restorative justice practices, and that such a report be added to the annual cycle of board reports.
Director Miller?
Through you, Chair, Revenge to Vice Chair Al Harrison, I think that's a report that serves the public interest and serves the interest of the trustees as well. And I'm looking to Superintendent Podra-Barrick as to the first one, every subsequent one will just figure out when. But the first one, I'm looking at you as to how quickly you could put a report together, and that could be the timing of every subsequent year, I think.
Through the chair to trustees and Director Miller, the report could be put together quickly within days. Really, it's data we're collecting all the time. In terms of some of the broader implementation around RP strategies or CPS, that can vary school to school. We don't track that. It could only give kind of general oversight. I'd also caution that those programs may be rebranded in a future multi-year plan. I mean, getting to what they're getting at, but then the names may change on them. So I might recommend putting more neutral behavioral intervention approaches or something of that like.
So Vice Chair Harrison, the directions to add a date of the first item to the first board meeting in March, perhaps?
Typing it into the agenda commenting piece for everybody.
And so you're going to bring that back next week, perhaps, or next meeting, or would you like to? Yes. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, thank you for that notice of motion. Trustee Collard, do you have a comment?
Yes, I do. Regarding the report that Vice Chair Harrison is requesting, I think that it might have more value to have it in September of every year so that we can be looking at the preceding school year. I don't think it would be harmful for us to have one mid-year this year as well, but to cycle it to be September so that when we're reflecting on an entire school year. And perhaps this eventually would be something we would tie to the operational plan or the multi-year plan. We could track it in a way that would be meaningful.
Through your chair to events, Trustee Collard. Yeah, we're amenable to that. Sure. If that's trustees' preference, that's not a problem for us as staff.
Okay. It's very cool. Okay, so there will be a motion coming to the table in 2 weeks, putting forth a request to have a report come at the beginning of March for this year, and then subsequently a report to come in September of subsequent years to reflect on previous school year activities. Okay. Okay, so next. Any other notices of motion? Seeing none, Director's report.
Thanks, Chair Drabents. I have just a couple of items tonight. The first one I will do, and then I'll turn it over to Superintendent Ruddock for the second one. I am very pleased and happy to announce that Heather Stonis of Emily Carr Public School has received the Provincial Teacher Librarian of the Year Award. The Halton District School Board, and this is a media release we put out, the Halton District School Board is proud to recognize Heather Stonis for being awarded the Teacher Librarian of the Year Award from the Ontario Library Association. This award honors a teacher librarian who has demonstrated leadership in the implementation of school library programs through collaboration and inquiry-based learning. So well done, Heather. You've made us all proud. For the second item, I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Ruddock. Just an update on coronavirus and where the board is in their preparations and our consultations with public health. And Superintendent Ethoff may weigh in with something as well.
Thank you. Through the chair to trustees, we are continuing to meet as a team once a week. We are monitoring the concerns that are being expressed by parents, students, and staff, and ensuring that our administrators have the right strategies and the right information in order to respond at the school level. And I have to say that they are doing an exceptional job supporting these needs in their schools. As an example of that communication that we've developed is the FAQ that I shared with you earlier this week. We are also requesting that principals make sure that their superintendent is informed of any behavioral incidents related to the coronavirus, particularly as it relates to our students who are within the Asian community, so that we can monitor this from a system perspective and ensure that we respond appropriately. I mentioned at the board meeting last week around posters for hand washing in bathrooms, and we created additional copies of this poster and sent it out to schools so that if any were missing, that those could get reposted. And you had asked me last week also to look into a poster around kind of a reduction around spreading a virus, and a poster has been put out to administrators to use as they see fit in the school office. It's really around the flu rather than coronavirus particularly, but the strategies are the same. And I can turn it over to Superintendent Etoff to speak more specifically around a message that will be sent out by Stuart as it relates to the treatment of some of our students in our schools.
Yes, I think it's important to recognize that some students, some of our Asian students in particular, students within the Chinese community may be feeling vulnerable right now, given some of the things that we've heard about both locally and internationally, really. And as a result, the Equity and Inclusive Education team has prepared a resource that's been sent out to schools for use by staff to address any anti-Asian racism, specifically a protocol for interrupting harmful language or acts. So that resource enables and provides language for educators to use if they notice this behavior or language occurring in their schools. And related to that, tomorrow we will be releasing a statement on behalf of Director Miller, which basically reinforces our stance regarding xenophobia, and particularly as it relates to coronavirus. And I'm happy to take any questions that trustees may have. Oh, you want me to read it? Sure. Yeah, sure. As you may be aware, recent attention related to the 2019 novel coronavirus has created concern about interacting with individuals who might be of Asian descent or have traveled to China. We're aware of unsettling examples of how this has led to discriminatory behavior. We recognize these are students and families who are feeling vulnerable due to public perception and stigma about the origin and spread of the coronavirus. Halton Region Public Health continues to stress that at the present time, the risk remains low to residents in Halton. We want to assure you that the Halton District School Board is committed to providing an environment where no student, staff, or family is targeted in any way. The Ontario Human Rights Commission recently released the following statement: discriminatory action against any persons or communities because of an association with the Wuhan novel coronavirus, perceived or otherwise, is prohibited by the Ontario Human Rights Code. We ask that all members of our school communities continue to ensure our schools are bias-free and safe spaces for all students and families. This can be accomplished by taking a stand to confront individuals who use harmful language and stereotypes. Together, we will continue to build communities that are respectful and caring, where all students and staff feel safe and have a genuine sense of belonging. Director Miller.
Okay, thank you very much for your report, and just also to note that there are two items that link to information that the Director's Office has sent in, one with regards to the budget consultations and the other feedback on education funding as requested by the Ministry. And now we're up to communications from the chair. So just reminding you that there are two links under the communications from the chair. One is the trustee feedback, education funding feedback that as per the ministry memo. And the other is a letter from Blue Water District School Board talking about the impact of e-learning credits on students with special needs. Just some other information that the board is currently working on the new multi-year plan that will cover the next 4 years. And we've had 2 excellent sessions co-facilitated by Superintendent Zonnefeld and Trustee Shuttleworth. The next session will be on February the 11th. And the steering committee, co-facilitated by Associate Director Bogue and Vice Chair Al Harrison, will be meeting tomorrow. We are up to committee reports, and I just want to mention that I received a committee report from SEAC, authored by Trustee Shuttleworth. Thank you very much. No, you don't have to read it, but I will be asking Manager Gortmaker if you could please attach it to the next board package. Thank you very much. Are there any other committee reports? Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I just wanted to thank trustees for their participation in the Inspire Awards cycle this month, and the information about recipients will be prepared for your signature at the committee meeting next week. So next month, on the first week, we'll have some excellent recipients.
That's great news. Trustee Reynolds, you're next.
Just to all trustees to invite you and welcome you to audit meeting next Tuesday, 2 to 5 in this room for the public session.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any other committee reports at all? Okay, seeing none, we are up to trustee questions and comments. Are there any questions or comments? Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Director Miller. We're all aware that tomorrow the Elementary Teachers Federation has called a strike day for all of the province. We also have recently heard, or I've recently heard, that there's a special weather statement that's being issued regarding freezing rain and snowfall. What will happen in terms of transport cancellation if this is necessary? And are there any other details that the school board needs to consider?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Drabens, to Trustee Shuttleworth. We will go through our normal process as we always do on snow day, on possible snow days or transportation cancellations. I've already been in contact with the manager of transportation this afternoon and the director of the co-terminus board, our co-terminus board, around, staying connected, looking at weather and so on. But like all these things are so difficult to make a decision until you're into it. And I know that's a challenge for communities and so on. However, so there's a couple of scenarios. If there's transportation canceled tomorrow, we will do our utmost to make that. By our AP, our admin procedure, we're required to make the decision by 6:30, but we will try to do it as we did last year prior to 6 o'clock. We have an added issue tomorrow with some of our students traveling to regional championships in various things. The current weather report we have is it's pretty isolated to this area, actually. Hamilton, Oakville, Burlington, etc. It doesn't appear to be north nor east Mississauga, Toronto, or wherever, right? At this point, it's hard to say. That's the one scenario. If there is transportation cancellation, it'll be just like every other transportation cancellation. And buses won't be running to our schools. Of course, they wouldn't be running to our elementary schools anyway because Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario is on strike tomorrow, so there would be no busing to any of our elementary schools. Our secondary school students who are bused, and we have numbers of them, would not be transported to their schools, and they'll do as they always do on transportation cancellation days. For those extracurriculars, our normal process, our process, not normal, our process is to cancel all activities in which there's buses. But in this particular one, there may be a timing issue in that those buses will already have left for where they're going. If that's the case, they'll be allowed to continue. If it is a full school closure day, and I want to put a big capital I and F if anybody's out there watching it, if it is a full school closure day, don't smile, Olivia. Our secondary schools, our elementary schools will be closed. Our teachers would have not been there anyway, but we would have administrators in some of those schools, but the schools will be closed, and some caretakers, so those schools will be closed. But it has no impact on what happens in terms of the elementary teachers or our elementary students. They're not coming to school tomorrow anyway. But our secondary schools would be closed, and it would have an impact because those students would normally be in school tomorrow. So, and we would get the same messaging. We've got specific messaging that will go out to address this situation if it happens, that our communications department and our executive officer of HR has worked on. So it's clear to everybody what's closed, what's not closed, and how we're dealing with it. It's a difficult one because, you know, I'll be up about 4:45 tomorrow. I'm not looking for sympathy, although that would help, to start the conversations with transportation and the other principal to see what we do. Okay?
I'm glad we delegate that to you.
Well, I will be phoning Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons tomorrow. Just a bugger, really.
Trustee Amos.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind everyone and anybody who's watching that Friday is the last day to submit your any proposed names for the new Northeast Oakville number 2 public school. The community, I know, I've heard some of the suggestions that have been going in, and I've heard that there are lots, so I look forward to when the committee gets together to have a look to narrow it down to come to the board. But Friday's the last day for suggestions.
Vice Chair Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I have 2 questions. First one is with respect to the Our Kids Network decision to no longer operate hubs in Acton, Aldershot, and Milton. And I just wonder about the impact on students.
Thank you, Vice Chair Al Harrison. I'll turn that over to Superintendent Pennyfather.
Thank you, through the chair, to Vice Chair Al Harrison. This is part of a larger thing. The Our Kids Network has 2018-19 done a new strategic plan, and so they've been changing. They're looking at changing their focus, or I would say honing it. And their goal is to transition out of the service, transition any of the services that they're doing to other providers. And that's also part of what they've always done. They've operated as a bit of an incubator. For example, in Aldershot, there was an after-school program that they started, and the Y now runs. And up in Milton, they started a backpack snack program, and that's now another provider is doing that. And so that's something that they've always done. And the other thing is some of the services that they're doing at these 3 hubs are specific to the schools and fit into the school day. And in Aldershot, it's Holy Rosary School. They haven't had an OKN employee there for over a year now, so they're phasing out. In Milton, they're working with Rock because one of the things they do is a summer camp. They're going to still do that this summer. And other providers I've spoken to are planning to stay there in Milton. They got into it because of OKN brought them in, and they plan to stay. So they're working that through up there. The issue in Milton for some of these types of providers is space, obviously, because of the growth and the room in schools and that kind of thing. And then in Acton, their aim is that there be no loss of programming. They don't plan to close till December. At the same time, there's the Acton Youth Network can take over some of their youth programs. And we've also had interest expressed towards the board from daycare providers and early on provider, the early on centers. So we think that as they sort of back off from those, that other providers will come in.
Super. Thank you very much. It's good to know that, firstly, there's gratitude for all the groundwork and the work that they've done in those communities and beyond, but it's also good to know that students will have other options. Yeah, thanks for explaining that. And the second thing is, I noticed that Upper Grand has recently approved placing naloxone kits in schools. And I was just wondering what our approach is, or whether our approach is going to be revised, given that I understand the technology for delivering naloxone has changed. There's different options for us now in the nasal sprays and so on. So I just wonder what the plan is, because I have to say that I think it's, if even one life can be saved by having those things in schools, that it is something that we need to do.
I will turn that over to Superintendent Ruddock and Superintendent Padreberry.
Thank you. Through the chair to Vice Chair L. Harrison. As some of you may know, we hosted a consultation group in April of 2018. At that time, we worked with public health, paramedics, and the Halton Regional Police Services. And through that conversation, it was not recommended to put naloxone in schools. But we are aware that a few boards have recently added them to their school, to their schools. And so we've decided to reconvene this consultation group with our coterminous board, public health, paramedics, and the police again. That is in early March. And so we anticipate having some more information for you in April.
Okay, great. So we have exhausted our agenda, and I declare this meeting adjourned.